I actually think in part, and it gets to exactly what you just pointed out about dissolving the distinction between sexes. I think in reality, the goal is not, we have this idea in terms of our day-to-day politics, identity politics, for example, that there is this, oh, these Marxist feminists are saying, we need to, seize power from the patriarchy and consolidate it into our own hands. And so therefore it's this zero-sum mentality of power dynamics. But in reality, I think that the ultimate goal of feminism is actually to dissolve conflict and dissolve power imbalances, not simply redistribute power from one group to another group. And a perfect example of why I think this is true is look at where feminism has led us. It's ultimately led us into transgenderism. Feminism has given birth to, I mean, this is shocking for somebody like J.K. Rowling, who doesn't seem to understand that she is the revolutionary who has given birth to the guillotine that is now coming for her.
Yeah.
Right? She's the, she's a member of the, the Girondins that are like horrified that the revolution that they supported is now turned on them. But I mean, and Rowling is actually a perfect example in this because she's a dyed-in-the-wool feminist. And yet she's also a TERF, right? A trans-exclusionary radical feminist. She's constantly talking about how transgenderism is intruding on women's spaces. But she's the one that supported everything up until that point in the process. Transgenderism is simply the fulfillment of feminism. It is the dissolving of the distinction between men and women. And therefore, it is also the attempt to dissolve what they identify as a power imbalance between men and women. And so in a way, what this is attempting to do is to dissolve conflict itself. It is viewing the dynamics between men and women as simply conflict-based. Men hold power over women. They're the oppressors, right? And women are the oppressed. And so it goes back to Andrew's point about how Marxism is in some ways feminist rather than feminism being Marxist. It's using that oppressed-oppressor dynamic. Well, one of the ways that you might be able to solve that is simply, cold calculating. Therefore, we're going to take power and just wield it in our own hands. And again, on a day-to-day basis,
but they're trying to avoid to be. They don't want to be the oppressors. They want to remove.
They want
the
to
dynamic
dissolve
which creates it.
the very class of oppressed and oppressor, and the very notion of conflict between the side, or just conflict in general. And so, what this leads to is eventually, well, how do you achieve the dissolving of conflict? How do you remove your conception of oppressor and oppressor? You dissolve distinctions wherever they're found. And so, of course, we deconstruct the family. Of course, we eliminate the distinction between men and women. Of course, we want men to be more feminine and women to be more masculine, because the ultimate goal is to actually erase gender itself. And if you dig deep enough into this, you get this especially in online spaces like Reddit, Discords. If you actually dig deep enough within feminist and transgender movements, what they're really actually advocating for, this is much deeper in the conversation, what they're really advocating for is abolishing gender itself.
So, and this goes to the point where it almost feels like the foundational starting point of all of this, and it's not just feminism, you see it in other ideologies as well, but the common thread is this component of what you might call secular hyper-egalitarianism. So secular in the sense that there is no outside moral entity that is telling us the way things should be.
It's self-referential.
Yeah, we're the ones that will decide us. Like, we are the ones we've been waiting for, like all that stuff. And then the other component of it is the egalitarian side is like, and the chief moral universe that we want to live in is the one that we're all equal. We're all equal value, equal access to resources, equality, everything. And the only way that you can do that, if you're actually trying to, is, again, eliminating the distinctions. And so I guess is that part of the argument here, is that is a fundamental, that feminism as we understand it is tied to that kind of secular egalitarianism, to where to separate that from feminism is to destroy feminism.
I would say yes and no. You're getting at something that is there, but I don't think that's an accurate description of it. First of all, Christian, deconstruct is a stupid make-believe word, and I'm going to say it every time you say it. Stop using it. The thing that you're getting at that I think is correct is the result. You're looking at the visible thing that we can see. Transgenderism has come from feminism, and we can see how this has come about over time. But I don't think you're correct in the intention. I don't think that's the intention at all, to get rid of conflict or to, erase the oppressor-oppressed dynamic. I think what you see, and again, all the way back to the beginning, through every wave, every influential feminist, this is one of the through lines that everything is really hit on, is this is what God has said about man, and I reject that. And what the practical outworking of that is, I think, what you're talking about, because the practical outworking of taking that kind of a stance is, I am God, and men make terrible gods. So you're looking at the outworkings of all of this, and we can see the consequences of these actions. And as I go back and look at these ideologies and try to see, okay, where did this come from? What's the principles that led to this? And a huge part of it is simply hubris, this arrogance that if people just do what I say, then everybody will get along and everything will be great. If I can order society, if I can just educate people into the right worldview, into the right understanding, then everything will be great. And what you see, when no matter what context that's applied to, no matter what ideology you're talking about, that leads to devastating consequences. Earlier I called feminism a subversive, right? It takes what is good and true and it subverts it. There are these distinctions between men and women, and I don't think it's about making women masculine or men feminism. It's about taking what God has said is true, nature itself. This is how humans are made to be, and saying, no, I don't want to be that. I want this thing over here. And really, a huge part of this, I call them bitterness ideologies, but a huge part of feminism is covetousness, which is a sin, right? It is somebody else has something I want. That man over there is able to do something and that looks fun and I want to be able to do it. I don't think there's really that much thought put into it of, am I trying to disintegrate conflict itself or get rid of oppressors and oppressed? I really don't think it goes that deep. When you read some of these women, it is petty. It is bitter. It is just vicious vitriol of somebody else seems to be having a better time than me, and people aren't treating me the way that I want to be treated. I'm not getting my way. And there's really a lack of thought put into, okay, but are my actions leading to these consequences? Is there something deeper here? Is there something fundamental here? There's really just a rejection of reality itself to say, no, but I don't want it that way. I want it to be this way. And what that leads to are all the consequences that you're looking at and seeing, okay, yeah, we can look back and see this is a very logical conclusion. We can see clearly how these things here led to these things over here. And that makes perfect sense. But I really don't think a lot of people who have that worldview and are in that ideology put that much thought into it.
Well, we're going to talk about the accountability side of this. Yeah, it's kind of like the rebellion against, God's created order, to the rebellion against even reason or logic, and where that factors into the accountability stuff.